Hi there. I think it's about time me and you had a chat. You see, I've got a long history on this channel. Together with my partner, we make videos that are ideas and inspirations and suggestions. And they are just that. Quite often when I read the comments, people are convinced that I'm being absolute and saying this is the only way you can possibly play. Well, no, these are just ideas. Things you might want to consider, but if they don't work for you, don't use them. So, with that being said, here's 5 things you are doing wrong. World building. Mistake number 1. Your history is not fantastical enough. And I mean that seriously, because quite often when we're building our worlds, we think, okay, right, so yeah, there was a human city here, and it went to war with this orc city over here, and then that happened, and this territory became theirs. Wrong, okay? Sort of wrong. If you look through real history, there are lots of examples where reality is just absolutely fantastically amazing. Take, for example, the Battle of Den Helder in 1795, just off the island of Texel in the north of the Netherlands. The Dutch Navy, with 14 ships and 850 cannon, was defeated by a French hussar regiment on horseback. And the way the cavalry defeated the Dutch Navy was by wrapping the hooves of the horses in cloth. That's right, horses beat boats at sea. How? The French 8th Hussar Regiment, supported by elements of the 15th Line Infantry Regiment thing, basically overran the ships. They approached at night and took them over. Point number 2. You keep telling the history of your world once. You see, there are 2 sides to every story. So let's look at another side of the Battle of Texel, the Den Helder Bay thing. Whilst it is true that the sea had indeed frozen over on that January night, and the cavalry were able to advance towards the ships, and 14 guns and 850 cannon were captured, but it was without a shot fired. There are no casualties from that battle, and the reason might be because the version of the truth that the Dutch tell is perhaps a little closer to what happened. You see, before the French arrived, the Dutch capital had already fallen. They had surrendered, and orders had been received by the fleet telling them to just surrender if the French turn up, that there's no point fighting, the war has already been lost. So, according to the Dutch, just a small contingent of Frenchmen made their way out to the boats to ask for their surrender. For example, in one of my settings, there is a story about a young girl holding nothing but a flower and the time she stopped an imperial army.
That's not what I heard.
Well, have you heard the story from the point of view of the Aherians, where this young girl has now passed into legend, and she's so historically important to them that she's a figure of great reverence, bordering on religion? However, if you grew up in the old empire, that's another story.
There was a young girl who had but a flower and stopped an army.
Stop! Stop! I command it by royal decree. This is not the story as it happened. I'll tell you what happened. She was a nobody, an inconsequential player. A silly child does not stop the march of highly trained imperial men. No, no. What actually happened was their barbaric Aherians on their horseback with their bows they attacked by surprise of night. That young girl, she was just a commander in the field. And indeed, there was a third version of the same story, told by the elves, who had been a diplomatic mediator in the incident, the elves trying to ensure the flow of the nostrum drug that they so depended on, that was abundant in the Ahirian domain. 3 versions of the same story, and when I wrote that setting, I didn't worry about which one was true. As far as the people in the world were concerned, their version of events was the reality that they lived in. That was their version of history. History is quite often geographical, or at least defined by the power block you live within. Which brings us to point number 3. So often in our world there is a common language spoken by everyone, and then there's an orc language and an elf language and maybe several religions popular with different humans, and then there's religions popular amongst halflings. In fact, this is something that's been propagated by Wizards of the Coast themselves with their appalling Sword Coast Guide, which I did a whole other review on many years ago and don't wish to relive. Feel free to go watch it. The point is that language and religion, and indeed our perception of history, is regionally defined. These things are defined by the boundaries of the power block that we live within. Our culture, the language we use to talk, and the things that we're often allowed to worship are defined by whose land we live within. Point number 4. When you're leaving your city, for some reason, outside there's nothing. Not a thing. Just fields. Maybe a forest off in the distance. Huh? Are you serious? That's not how cities work. Cities are a series of connected villages that all kind of grew into each other. The area outside your city walls, it's more villages, it's more farmland. I mean, how does this city eat? It needs farms. So some of these buildings, they're going to be on the other side. And the road's going to carry on. In fact, it's entirely possible that when your city was first built and the walls erected, that the city was much smaller than what it has become today. In fact, in lots of historical battles for cities like the Siege of Colchester, a city in Britain that had city walls and they were used to defend it, but they had to build extra walls temporarily because when the siege came in the English Civil War, the city walls were in the wrong place. Point number 5. In your village, you'll have all sorts of things that signify life is going on, like neighbours with really loud music in their car that they're not even near their car now and they've still got the music playing. But one thing you're not going to have is one of every kind of shop. You know, something like a blacksmith. This little blacksmith here is not a village shop. A blacksmith is a specialist who deals with particular kinds of things, metal work, basically. And every village having a blacksmith is ridiculous. And quite often in our adventures, if we wander along to a village, there'll just happen to be a blacksmith there because adventurers use blacksmiths quite a lot. But that's kind of crazy. A skilled profession like that would be in a town. People will travel from miles around to get to a specialist vendor such as a blacksmith, especially one with a good reputation. But it doesn't just stop with blacksmiths. All manner of tradespeople would do that. And this is where the idea of markets comes from. A temporary sales establishment for travelling salespeople to set up shop, sell their wares on a Monday, and on Tuesday be selling them somewhere else. So your network of roads around your cities should be filled with villages and little towns that have markets, and in between all of your market towns should be wandering vendor caravans who are setting up their market stall in each town in succession, and then when one particular vendor's run out of things to sell, they might wander back to their home village, and a different vendor might well join the caravan because their carrots have just come into harvest, or whatever it is that's for sale in your world. So there it is. These are my 5 things that you are definitely doing wrong, which are just ideas and suggestions that you might want to hear out, just see if there's something in there that you can use. But, you don't have to. Don't go into the comments saying I'm arrogant and ignorant because I didn't, I'm assuming that the only way to play is my way. That's not true. I get 2 kinds of comments, that kind and the abusive kind. Anyway, thank you for watching Pair of Geeks. If you've enjoyed this video and found it useful, there's loads more videos like this. Just please subscribe, or indeed join our little fan club thingy. We have a kind of a sort of a fan club thing. It's a Patreon, okay? It's our way of saying it's a Patreon. We don't call it a Patreon though, we call it a Fruitbowl. You can become a Fruitbowl. That still makes me laugh. I can make you into a Fruitbowl.